Okay, people, Urantia book time. So, one thing that we need to be aware of as powerhouses, pioneers, and lighthouses on this planet, because that's what we are. If we are people who are seeking spirituality, seeking truth, seeking an understanding that is beyond what man's understanding would give you alone, then you are truly a powerhouse, a lighthouse, and a pioneer, folks, in this planet. And one thing that these types of beings need to be aware of is what is happening and transpiring on the world around us. Why? Not to dwell on it and to have it be something that brings us down, because it surely will if you read through the newspaper. Bad news, bad news, bad news. Um, Occasional good news. And remember, those bad news things are getting highlighted, because if you look at a piece of white paper, for instance, and you were to see a speck of black, which would represent the negative or the bad news or the evil, it would really truly stand out. So, like, for instance, if we have this as a white piece of paper, and I put this tiny square here, you're going to see that. This is a pink pen, but if you had a black pen, even more so, right? So you're going to see that on this whole, this is the field of good that's transpiring, okay? So these incidences aren't the, let's say, overall makeup of the universe, but in this circumscribed location on the planet, they are very prevalent. And not only that, but the victimhood that comes from it is extremely terrible. If you've ever been on the receiving end as a victim, maybe it was something minor, hopefully. I don't know. You got bit by your neighbor's dog and it wasn't that bad, but you still had to go through filling out the police report and stuff. It's very. Now, that's just a minor example. If it's a major example, you're talking about, if you don't die during it, many of them die during, then you're talking about years of trauma, trying to go to therapy to unwind from this, a hole in your heart because somebody that you loved had died, all this sort of stuff. So they seem like they stick out much, much more than all the good that's transpiring. And remember the key quote: awareness is queen to revelation. So if we're powerhouses, lighthouses, and pioneers, then we need to be aware, not again to dwell on it, like I said, but if your mission on this planet is service, uplifting, changing the world one step at a time, maybe in your small sphere to start out with, then you need to be able to tell people what is happening on this planet is not normal. What's transpiring is not status quo for the universe. It might be status quo here, because right now, if we have an incident like somebody's bills get raised, right? Oh no, my electricity bill went up. They think that that's status quo. Oh no, inflation. Everything always goes up, always goes up. You can equate the word inflation in your mind with another word that is called greed. Every time you hear inflation, every time you see inflation, that is greed. There's people picking that money off the top, all right? They're money changers. They're switching money around from various funds to accounts to treasury yields. They're just, all they're doing is changing money, and each time it changes, there's some that goes into their thing. Remember, everybody is sticking it to one another here. It's just who can stick it to somebody else first and hardest in order to gain up that corporate ladder. That's sometimes people do have a genuine good business model and that sort of thing. As good as it could be for this planet, at least. But for the most part, what rises to the top here is going to be your greed. If we froze the maximum salary of somebody, of just a law that says that there's a maximum salary cap, nobody can make this much more than this per year, we would not see inflation, and we would also not see the minimum wage need to rise at all. Everything would stay locked in place as far as your financials. Yes, people would have to be comfortable with not being billionaires, but billionaires are, we know all the stats on that. They can spend a million. Elon Musk can spend something like $1 million a day for the next 73,000 years. I forget what the real number is, but it's maybe 7,300 years, something like that. It's absolutely absurd here. But yes, they did earn some aspect of why they're at the top. So we can't take away all of their accolades to say that, oh, they didn't invent something or, they didn't have that. Okay, so we're not trying to just completely strip people away from their accolades. Look at your Bill Gates, for instance. He did invent Microsoft and all of those computer structured systems that power the world, basically. So he did have his, but then he got into buying, $7 million garages for his cars. And I saw an interview. He even admitted once that this was too much. This was above and beyond what he was doing. And yes, they have their foundations where they're sending the money out through the back, through the front door of saying, "Oh, we got these foundations. We're doing X, Y, and Z." But then they have it funneling in through the back door, tenfold, a hundredfold. Okay, so but did they put it out the front door in their foundation and try to do good? Yes. So again, not we have to look at truth and reality and the totality of the picture to say that truth in a judgment of somebody's soul, which isn't our job. But if we were to just even judge from a planetary level, an earthly level, to say, is this person good? Do we need people like? Do we need billionaires on the planet? Well, the answer is definitely no, because you cannot have extreme wealth on the planet without extreme poverty. They are tied together. They are two sides of a coin, okay? You can't lift the bottom up while you're still having that top, because the top just doesn't want to let go of that slice of that money changing pie that they just keep siphoning off and siphoning off. So if we could teach people about that, if we can tell them and say that's not normal, we need to cap the salaries. Nobody needs to make, I wouldn't even know the number because I don't know much about economy, economics as far as like studied or anything. I've never studied it, but just from a practical sense, does anybody ever need to make more than $1 million per year? At the end of the year, you have $50 million. So you're not even close to 1/10 of a billionaire, which is 1,000 millions. So, you know, and that's making $1 million per year. You can walk into any store you wanted and be like, oh yeah, let's buy this, let's buy this. I mean, to argue that somebody needs more than $1 million per year is just, you just are, your finger is completely off the pulse of of how the world works. When they go into a store and they're looking at plans and saying, oh, are we going to get the better plan for our Verizon? I don't know. It's $10 extra a month, blah, blah, blah. People go, people with money go into that. They're like, just get the best, just get the best. Like, they don't even have to think about it. And that's how life should be for all of us. We should be able to do that. And if you settle the system down to have maybe, 30% difference between the highest and the lowest in the earnings class, so you have your small fraction of capitalism actually in there. You still own your private property. Okay, so it isn't like this pure communist type of system that everybody wants to make into the boogeyman. Nobody wants that, okay? Scandinavian countries, they don't have a pure communist type system, but there's way less wiggle room between the bottom and the top. So maybe you're 30% or something. If somebody really wants to work hard to earn $1 million per year, then maybe they can do it. Oh, did I lose my page? We're looking at, anyways, expose and disclose as aware beings. Awareness is queen to revelation. So we're trying to expose things like the criminal organization known as the Federal Reserve. We're trying to expose the weapons manufacturing, the military industrial complex, the sick care industry, because it's not health care. That's a double speak type of thing. You go there when you're sick. That's what all, I mean, if you looked at the fraction of the money that's like, oh, a wellness visit, I went in and I came out with a good bill of health. How much percent of the actual money changing hands in that industry is just, I went in and I came out, I was healthy, health care, maybe 0.5%. Okay, what is the major bulk of it? Sick care. So it is the sick care industry. But see, people, unless what takes beings like us who have been able to tap into the real nature of reality and truth, which is the philosopher's stone, then we are not able to call it things. We're not able to see those double speak type things like sick care, healthcare industry. All right, I lost my page, but let's go through this. I believe it's messenger hostess space that we're looking at. Ministering spirits. Oh, yeah, okay. Either primary super, NAFM, or I think it's primary supernathan. Perfecter of Wisdom, page 298. Let's look at this and see if this is what I wanted to talk about. So, yeah, expose and disclose, not to dwell on it. So, pick up a newspaper. What's another one that not news. I haven't looked at a newspaper since, the 30s. No. Let's see. We're looking, or I look at the news online. Okay, whatever. I just say newspaper so you understand. Um, but if we're talking about expose and disclose, we also have to talk about our shadow governments. What did the shadow governments used to be, though? The wealthy families that ran and control, and they're still there for the most part. But now it's changing hands. Now you got your new money type things going on with all your tech billionaires, your crypto investors, and that sort of stuff. Well, look at Elon Musk, how he took Doge over, and he was able to just basically hijack our government, hack into all of our systems. It wasn't even hacking; they were allowed to. They had the mandate that they could just go into all the systems, get all the information, and then they cut people off of USAID, which is objectively known to begin to kill. I think the estimate is like it's in the millions of people that it's going to kill, literally kill, because of the fact that Elon Musk decided that this doesn't fit his tech oligarch hierarchy of what the world should be like, which is a form of fascism. It's like tech fascism. The Curtis Yarvin school, who was a insane person who went insane taking LSD and like exposing himself to all these weird situations, and he came up with this tech fascism where we're going to have these fiefdoms. And the thing is it sounds like this out of the world fringe theories, but this is who the most rich and powerful people in the planet are forming their new ideology around, this tech fascism, basically, where the wealthy and the tech are the leaders of the planet, okay? And we're seeing it happen. Look at your Palantir organization, who's Palantir's choosing the, targets for your military strikes is done by an AI called Palantir, and it's invented by Peter Thiel, who is another Curtis Yarvin fanboy who looked at this guy's weirded out LSD ideas about how a few of them should control everything, and they love it. And so they're going to spend as much as they possibly can to make this future come into thing. And and then what's even more shadow than that? Well, look at who their boss is. We know who their boss is from the Urantia book. Your Caligastias, your Dalagastias, all those midwayers who are still on the planet, and they are influencing the minds of people. Only to those people who are open and receptive towards having their mind. They cannot do possession or anything like that. But if you are already inclined to evil and you are ready to sell your soul to gain everything on the planet, they have a ripe mind that they can then do whatever powers that they can as brilliant superhuman beings. Instigator's arrest, no. Was it? Oh, no. Okay, so that's who we have to be aware of so that we can tell people. And again, does it matter to us as far as if this is this going to weigh us down? No, it's not going to weigh us down in the slightest. But we can help others. I'm looking for... Sorry, I guess I was unprepared. Let's just pause this for now. Okay, so we're looking at the Pilgrim's Helpers. Now, this is very interesting because it gives some very interesting tidbits about what's to come as a revelation. People get caught up in the either scientific knowledge of the Urantia book or even the philosophical or the comments about humanity. But if you look at the spiritual aspects of the book, the actually revelatory parts, there's so many good tidbits of helpful information. So let's look at this on page 291. The Pilgrim Helpers, ministering spirits of the central universe. The first of the 7 groups of secondary supernaphim to be, these are angels, they call them in Western man's Bible, or I don't know if people still call it Western man's Bible, but um, those beings of quick understanding and broad sympathy who welcome the much-traveled ascenders of space to the stabilized worlds and settled economy of the central universe. Simultaneously, these high ministers begin their work for the paradise pilgrims of eternity, the first of whom arrived on the pilot world of the inner Havona circuit concomitantly with the landing of Gran Fonda on the pilot worlds of the outer circuit. So that's the first mortal being, what we consider like a human being, to ever make it to the central universe and through the whole thing. Way, 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 way back. Back in those far distant days, the pilgrims from paradise and the pilgrims of time first met on the receiving world of circuit number 4. These pilgrim helpers, functioning on the 7th circle of Havona worlds, conduct their work for the ascending mortals in 3 major divisions. So you can get a glimpse now here about what is to... We're talking about after we've even gotten out of the local universe, okay? We've had many lives, but they're all ascending lives. Nothing is repeating like in our traditional views of reincarnation. Before they knew how large the universe was, when they invented reincarnation, they didn't know anything about astronomy or anything like that. Now they know. If they were to contemplate the same things today, they would say, wow, the universe is so big. Why would we repeat these lives in the same world? Now, after we get out of the local universe here, and then we're in the central universe, well, that's Havona, okay? The supreme understanding of the Paradise Trinity is first what you're going to learn. Supreme understanding. Second, the spiritual comprehension of the Father-Son partnership. And third, the intellectual recognition of the infinite spirit. So that's intellectual of the mind. Each of these phases of instruction is divided into 7 branches. Okay, so you got 3 major ones, and then they each branch off into 7. And of the 12 minor divisions of 70 subsidiary groups, and each of these 70 subsidiary groupings of instruction is presented in 1,000 classifications. So you can see how much instruction it takes to understand the nature of God, the nature of these relationships, like the father-son relationship. What is that? 1,000 times 70? It's just absolutely... Now, the only thing I don't know is, can you skip some of them if you are really astute and, you're really trying to dedicate yourself to this? I'm not sure about that, but something leads me to believe that you can. But the other thing that makes me think that, why would you want to? I think that these experiences are going to be so grand and glorious that somebody says, would you skip one? Well, what are you really ultimately trying to do? Why would you skip something like that just to get the end? Remember, it's the journey. The journey is the enjoyable thing. And that can even be something that we keep in mind during our regular human life. It's the journey that's the profound aspect. There's some saying about that, but I forget what it is. If you know it, it's the journey, not the destination or something. I forget what it is, but leave it in the comments if you... So another way to think about it, really, how could there really be that much to understand? We read this little Urantia book. I mean, it's big for this planet, but we read this book and we say, wow, we have a pretty good grasp of what God might be and what the relationship between the Father and the Son might be, right? But you're still just talking about worms in the intellectual. Not that we are worms, because we have a fragment of divinity within us, and we are much beyond the animal. But just to use a very crude comparison, imagine how much a worm would have to know about basketball, right? Or the physics of basketball or something. And that's just one tiny little branch of understanding that worm just has no concept of whatsoever about that there's a game that people play where they try to score points. And then the history of basketball, the stats of Pistol Pete Maravich in 1974. So you just see, just from that little tiny perspective, it's absolutely vast. Now, if you enlarge your perspective, say, I'm the worm in the universe, and again, only a crude comparison because you're nothing even close to a worm, you're absolutely brilliant. On a spirit, well, you have the potential to be brilliant, where a worm doesn't. They're just always going to be worms. You have the potential to be absolutely brilliant. But you were to say, what's beyond my current level of understanding? Why they call that what's the word? Oh man. It's the Dunning-Kruger, maybe? I forget what it is. When people think that they get a little bit of knowledge and they think that that means that they know a lot. I remember this happened to me with chess, big time. I got like a few lessons in chess and I could beat the beginning computers. And I thought I was like, oh wow, I totally got chess figured out. But years later, I realized that, it's not even close, but I believe it's the Dunning-Kruger paradox, where you think that you have a grasp of things just because you have. We are living the Dunning-Kruger paradox to the max here. So more detailed instruction is provided on subsequent circles, but an outline of every paradise requirement is taught by the pilgrim helpers. That then is the primary or elementary course which confronts the faith tested. So we've already been faith tested and much traveled pilgrims of space. So it's quite revelational, not even just our next phase, but beyond that. But long after reaching Havona, these ascendant children of time have learned to feast upon uncertainty. Look at that. So when your life is being challenged, don't think that it's just this stressed out. So you're feasting on uncertainty. To fatten upon disappointment. See this hardening of the soul that's happening here, people? But hardening in a way that makes you impervious to disappointment. There's no such thing. You're disappointment proof. And I believe even Jesus of Nazareth maybe said that. Well, he definitely was that. To enthuse over apparent defeat, which is just an absolute brilliant mindset to have. Now, it's a little bit different than in the Eastern, where they just take themselves out of the game entirely. Okay? They go off into the monastery. We're different because we're actually in the game still. We're going for various challenges, trying to succeed. And what they did was absolutely phenomenal. Don't get me wrong about trying to minimize, the level of mind control they have is absolutely phenomenal. But you can have it both, okay? You can short circuit that through your spiritual understanding. You'll be given, if you learn to feast upon defeat and still carry on and still have love in your heart and still serve your neighbor and all that sort of stuff, you're going to be given all those things that monk has been given through all of those, mantras, saying the mantra a billion times over. If you can just help people and go forward and have a defeat and then get back on your feet, you're going to be given the same thing. Your mind is still going to ascend to those same levels. Invigorate in the presence of difficulties. Okay, this is who we want to be. You have a difficulty, just face that thing. Not only just face it, invigorate. Be like, yes, here it is, my growth. I'm giving more batteries to my thought adjuster to make a supercomputer, a super machine, to exhibit indomitable courage in the face of immensity, and to exercise unconquerable faith when confronted with the challenge of the inexplicable. Okay, so you still have your faith. This is after you've already been doing this. Long since the battle cry these pilgrims became, in liaison with God, nothing, absolutely nothing is impossible. The universe is taking animals, literal worms, evolving them up to the level of humans, at which point they have quality of mind that now they can work with a thought adjuster. And then they are and then they can go on to become gods. Not the Father God, but equivalent as far as what is capable of a mortal, the highest possible. But if you learn that much, people, you're going to understand so much. If you go through all those schools, because eventually the people that are the celestial beings that write this book posit that the mortals are going to have their own universes. So they will need the knowledge on how to create a universe, in other words. Okay? Nothing is impossible. Okay? That's what they believe. That hasn't been revealed to even the highest beings in the universe that write these pages as to what this whole scheme of ascending worms up to the level of gods is. They haven't been given that, but it's philosophically replete because God is incapable of sin and understanding what it's like to do that. Just absolutely incapable of it. Okay, it'll never happen. There's never nothing that's other than perfection that comes out of God. So the God, the supreme, is the evolving God of time and space, which we evolve through our own choices, one at a time, is actually the repleteness of God, and it's checking off that box of what it's like to need to evolve, what it's like to not be created in perfect evolutionary perfection rather than existential, always perfect from the beginning of time, before time, and pre-time, post-time, all that. So we're checking off that box, but then, geez, what do you do with these beings once you've got them all perfected up, right? They've gone through all this. This is what their mindset is. Now what are you going to do? They posit that there's these vast areas. Well, they know there are these vast areas of the outer space regions that they believe that we are going to begin a new universe age where we then are going to be able to evolve our own universes, planets, and that sort of thing. And I believe that that seems like a very fitting goal for what we're going. I mean, that's just vast, vast training, as you can see there. There is a definite requirement of the pilgrims of time on each of the Havona circles. And while every pilgrim continues under the tutelage of Supernaphim, by nature adapted to helping that particular type of ascendant creature, the course that must be mastered is fairly uniform for all ascenders who reach the central universe. This course of achievement is quantitative, qualitative, and experiential, intellectual, spiritual, and supreme. So there is the quantitative aspect of it, okay? But there's also the qualitative. So for instance, Elon Musk was trying to cut $700 billion Doge, this and that, and he ended up taking money out of people's things. Now, we don't want a system in the world where we're just handing out to people. We want everybody to work on the planet. But the way to go about it is not to just strip it and cut them off. You have to put different systems in place. You have to spend money on doing educational systems, doing things like family planning, intelligent control of the population. And so some of their ideas are congruent with ideas in the Urantia book. For instance, intelligent control of the population. We need to be able to have a population which is stabilized, which we don't have so many fringe people that aren't able to get themselves out of addictions, that aren't able to work, that are so mentally off that they're a danger because there was a stabbing, I forget where it was. I mean, there's probably 10 a day, who knows, but there was one that made the national news of, it was at the soccer game or something, I forget. But, people fly off the handle and just randomly stab people. And we need to be able to intelligently control these sorts of situations, or else we're going to have. So they have some of their ideology. Remember, again, when you're dealing with man, you're dealing with half truth. When you're dealing with the Urantia book, you're dealing with full truth. But you remember, truth is living. You have to learn how to apply it to your own situation and in this own juncture of time. And on this circumscribed world, qualitative, experiential, right? But remember, he did it quantitatively, but he didn't do it qualitatively. The qualitatively would be like, dude, people are going to suffer, you idiot. What are you doing? You're the trillionaire. You're the world's richest trillionaire, and you're taking food out of the mouths of babies during your USAID objectively known cuts that cost lives. Okay, this isn't partisan. Okay, that's objectively known. but we have to go about it in more wise and smart ways. Remember, we have to play the long game here. We can start by getting money out of politics. Okay, we can make those simple moves. If you're going to do something like, I believe that the homeless people should be interned into a work camp so that way they can have a meaningful life and do some sort of task that they're capable of doing without education. A lot of them are educated. You can hook some, there's a lot of addicts out on the street that are very educated. You could get them in the right situation where they can be very good in their field. It could be a very advanced field because we're not talking about dumb people a lot of the time. So I believe that the homeless people should be interned. They'd have a nice, safe place to sleep where they can have a bed. They can have, they're not killing themselves on the street through injecting into the same open wound all day. And you say, once you get better, then you can get out. You didn't hurt another person. Well, maybe they did hurt another person. Maybe they sold drugs or something like that. But you can have a rehabilitation program. They can have health care. And then they also work. So, if you're doing that, there's a way to do it. So you're just looking at the quantitative result and saying, oh, this way we won't have to pay as much taxes. And that's, your Elon Musk philosophy, or why a lot of people went along with Musk. Why am I paying to have some person in Africa have food? And so they're looking this, quantitative. Quantitative is a reality, okay? We want the dollars and cents to make sense, and they can. We can have it all here. But we can't forget about this. All right? Intellectual, spiritual, and supreme, evolving God, okay? Evolving spirit. Time is of little consequence on the Havona circles. In a limited manner, it enters into the possibilities of advancement. But achievement is the final and supreme test. You gotta do something. You have to achieve. But you have this large amount of time. The very moment your superific, angelic basically, superific associate deems you to be competent to pass inward to the next circle, you will be taken before the 12 adjutants of the 7th Circuit Spirit. Here you will be required to pass the tests of the circle determined by the super universe of your origin and by the system of your nativity. So there's an actual testing here, people. Okay, there's a real sense of achievement, and that a test is a test. The divinity attainment of this circle takes place on the pilot world and consists in the spiritual recognition and realization of the master spirit of the ascending pilgrim's super universe. When the work of the outer Havona circle is finished and the course presented is mastered, the pilgrim helpers take their subject to the pilot world of the next circle and commit them to the care of the supremacy guides. The pilgrim helpers always tarry for a season to assist in making the transfer both pleasant and profitable. So again, we have it both there. We have it all. Pleasant and profitable. And that's profitable not just not dollars and cents whatsoever, but the economy of the universe, which is spirit. So that's just one little blurb, but you can see there's a lot of hidden gems and wisdoms about. Now remember, that actual testing thing, you're going to be well prepared for that if you just simply go along with the flow and you just simply try to manifest the will of the Father and all of your moves throughout this entire thing. And you're just aware, and you just manifest that. Any type of thing that you're born with, maybe somebody's born with a low IQ sort of mind, maybe a mental disability, they could rewire all that. You'll be given a new mind, absolutely 100%. And so, you don't have to say, geez, I'm bad at tests. Does that mean I'm going to fail any of this type of stuff? But remember, if you fail, but it's not failure, it's simply that you don't succeed. That is not, and it's not a failure, because remember, you're feasting on those sort of situations. Where does it say that up here? You're being enthusiastic over apparent. It doesn't even say defeat. That's why they say apparent defeat. There is no failure. It's just apparent defeat. So, in other words, just relax and flow, manifest the will of the Father. Don't worry about the time scale that it takes. Don't beat yourself up if you can't do it. You're to get back up. As long as you're getting back up in each one of these, and that defeat becomes only just simply isolated, and you're feasting at, whoa, I was able to get up again. Am I invincible? Yes, spiritually you are. So just bring it along. Bring it along at your own pace. Okay, folks, take care. Hope you enjoyed the video.